It is still Valentine's Day, my AKAPADers. We're going to go back in time. 1989, always. The 80s was a boom period for Hollywood films. 1989 means we're getting right into the 90s, and the 90s was just a bigger boom period where we had the rise of independent film and blockbusters like this that later got perfected through the process of the 90s. Always is a fantastic movie. Always is a remake. Always is one of the best performances of Richard Dreyfuss and Holly Hunter and John Goodman. You watch Always, you just want more of these characters. Now, the movie itself does not have a perfect third act, but it's a Steven Spielberg movie, and there's perspective to add to watching this movie now versus what was said then. And that's what we're doing today. So let's hang out and talk Steven Spielberg.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Happy Valentine's Day, AK Powers. Right, I think you're listening to this on Valentine's Day. I've been scrambling around some of these releases. I thought this was... It's not a perfect love story. It's a very tragic, frustrating love story. But it's perfect for a film buff Valentine's Day love story. Always came out between two movies. Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade, and 1991's Hook. In 1993, Steven Spielberg directs Jurassic Park and Schindler's List. Leading into Always, we have 1987, Empire of the Sun. 1985, The Color Purple. 1984, Indiana Jones. 1983, Twilight Zone, anthology movie. 1982, E.T. Extraterrestrial. 1981, Raiders of the Lost Ark. 1971, 1979, 1941. 1977, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In 1975, Jaws. Now, he's got other movies in front of Jaws, but we really take the 1975 Steven Spielberg, and it's Jaws, Close Encounters, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and E.T. These are the four films that built the Spielberg film empire. In the middle of all of those, we have 1941. 1941 is a solid SNL style slapstick comedy of the day that complements a movie like Animal House. It's got a lot of the same people in it. For whatever reason, the film commentary community during this time walked away from 1941 and walked away from Always. Always was looked at as this major fumble of Steven Spielberg. But we do forget that The Color Purple, a lot of people felt that movie got robbed at the Oscars. And in 1987, Empire of the Sun similarly gets robbed of all adulation. And Empire of the Sun, I remember seeing that movie as a kid. That's got a child Christian Bale in that movie. John Malkovich. The movie is incredible. It's his love letter to David Lean. We have a lot of David Lean in this movie as well, too. So the mythology of Steven Spielberg really got solidified in 93 when he comes back and makes Jurassic Park, which becomes the biggest movie like ever. And then he destroys it. He kills it at the Oscars with Schindler's List. But here's the thing. When I was growing up, I stayed away from 1941. Never watched it, never even owned the VHS, and stayed away from Always. Even when Always would come on Cinemax and HBO, I would just stay away from this movie. I don't care. It's just that Steven Spielberg movie that's supposed to suck. I'm not supposed to watch it. This is why on this podcast, it's important when we focus on movies like this. We're in a current media sphere where movies get torn down and a lot of flack before you even see them. And a lot of people go into movies nowadays with a preconceived notion, a preconceived opinion, or a pre-thought opinion. But when I was younger, 1997, Jurassic Park Lost World comes out. I remember seeing that in theater, and I'm just like, this, what the hell is this? And scrambling around Philadelphia, went street to street, would take the train from the Lindenwold Speed Line in New Jersey, get off on Market Street in Philadelphia, and I was able to find a bootleg copy of Amistad. So I rush home. It's shot in the theater, and I watch it. Amistad is a tough movie. It really is. But it's Oscar bait. It's another play for the Schindler's List. Doesn't quite happen, but the next year he makes Saving Private Ryan, and Steven Spielberg's back. So we see a little bit of this like pattern where Spielberg is just able to rebound, but this pattern evaporates. It winds down. Where the older Spielberg gets, there's less and less there, and there's more crevices. Meaning, we can watch Munich, and we can argue that Munich is a highly underrated movie. We can watch War Horse or Bridge of Spies or Ready Player One, or even go back to Amistad and go back to Hook, or in this case, go back to Always and see what was happening. This is a remake of a movie, I think a guy named Joe, it was written by Trumbo, who is now legendary because of multiple movies made about him, and I think an Oscar-winning documentary. But he was blacklisted during the communist scare era, which was now you want to say the communist scare era in American history was actually real, because they did take over Hollywood and art institutions and colleges. I'm very curious about the original of this movie. What this movie does, we have Richard Dreyfuss, and we get to learn about this job that he does, which is they put that pink stuff over fires. They smother fires, and we see the culture that these people live in. We see how they interact, what means something to them, how they fall in love, how they make friends, and relatively how they die. Richard Dreyfuss he's just a straight up good guy in this movie. He's a heroic character. He saves the life of John Goodman before his entire airplane just like blows to smithereens. And then Richard Dreyfuss is somewhat of a ghost, and he's in and out of these people's lives as the love of his life falls in love again, and he's got to learn to let go so she can learn to let go. This movie here, you guys ready? We get Ghost, the Patrick Swayze Ghost movie with Demi Moore. That comes out right after this, like a year later. And then 2 years after this, we get Backdraft by Ron Howard. Another banger movie. Always is Ghost and Backdraft wrapped into one movie. We have the John Williams score. We have some David Lean wide shots, wide lenses. Where this movie falls apart, it's really in the third act, where Holly Hunter, who really, I thought when I looked up the Oscars for this year, that she was going to get a Best Actress nomination. We're also in the late 80s. We're getting into the early 90s with the 1989 release. It's all the Oscars in all the categories, less competitive for Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress. That's just the history of the Oscars right there. It's highly competitive. John Williams didn't even get a Best Music nomination. That's how you know it was competitive. John Williams has an incredible score for this movie. But Holly Hunter ends in submerged in water. She's basically right there about to die, and the ghost of Richard Dreyfuss just gets her out of this body of water and puts her on the path of being rescued. And he does that so that she can continue life and be in love. But in a way, she made choices in her own life that maybe would have brought her to him in the afterlife, right? it's a challenging ending. It has challenging logic, but everything along this path in this movie stumbles a little bit when we see, like a year or so, 6 months, or I think 6 months up to a year later, what everyone is up to. And John Goodman in this movie, he plays the lovable guy, the lovable fool. And he is so downtrodden from watching his friend die in front of him after saving his life. He doesn't really quite come back in the movie. And you think he would, you think the girl, Holly Hunter, would be more, he would be jovial and she would be more down. And the rest of the characters help her to get over this grief. But when we have three lovable characters, we have John Goodman, Holly Hunter, and Richard Dreyfuss. We have these three individuals that we love so much on screen, that interact so well. They really are a trinity. It's challenging when we're at the 1 hour mark in this movie to get through all of that emotion. We just assume some of these characters end up better and these other things. Now, the other issue is the counterpart of who Holly Hunter falls in love with. We don't quite believe this is the guy and he's lovable, even though we have this incredible scene where him and Holly Hunter, they do these John Wayne impressions. But Holly Hunter is the center of this movie. You kind of would say she should be on the poster. She really should have been front and center in this movie. She's so good. And that's a little bit of the positioning where we have these three characters. One of them dies roughly, I think it's even 40 minutes into the movie. We all know, who are we paying attention to? What's the real focus of this movie? Because once Richard Dreyfuss dies, it's a lot of his journey's inconsequential. It just doesn't land because we know he's dead. He's not in the world of consequence anymore. I feel the concepts that are juggled by the production and Steven Spielberg, I think the concepts land. I think everything is presented well. I think this movie is beautiful. It's shot so well. You learn about the life of these people that put out these fires, and you cheer for them. It's a successful movie. We can argue about the ending, but I kind of want to give the ending a couple more rounds. But this is a fantastic movie. This is I think this is a great selection for a Valentine's Day film buff movie, because you have to be a film buff to dive into this film. And I'm hoping you do the same. Love you guys.
Okay, that's a wrap.